Good morning. It's still morning, yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jackie. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I have so much to say before I even start my talk. Let me see. It's great. Kent, I could listen to you all day. That's just awesome. And is it Raisa that's sitting next to me? Is it Raisa? Sitting like between you on one side and her on the other, singing to me. It was like, wow. And then, Christina, that was just amazing, the song that you did. So you guys are awesome. So I had commented, I know Reverend Sean from the Unity Movement from the Eastern region, and when he asked me to speak here, I was really excited about it. And I kind of had this vision of this like really huge church, because y'all notice Reverend Sean is kind of larger than life. And I speak around the country at Unity churches all around the country, and usually at some of the bigger ones. So I was kind of picturing this big center, and I came as like, really? All right, good. Now, so I was like, okay, good. So that was the comment earlier. So now I figured it out, though. Do you know why? Because the higher and higher you raise in energetic consciousness and vibration, the less people there are. So you guys are so high in consciousness that you're just popping the place out in energy. And, as you're not your average church. It's really, the energy here is amazing. And what you guys are creating here is amazing. And I know you'll continue to be blessed with your good. And I can't see you. D. You're so funny, hon. I see your first time here, right? Yeah, well, welcome to the whole Unity thing. Because it's like, so how many, just...
Someone sings, I'm like, oh.
I know. So how many, just to make her feel better, how many of you, your first time in a Unity church, look just like her? Like, oh my God! Oh, I'm home! This is yeah, right? So it's just like, it's just the Unity thing. I don't know, it's like something in the doorways when you go through into a Unity center. You just start to cry. You bring a bag of tissues, yeah. So like, welcome, you're home, right? So it's awesome. All right, so I think that was all that I had to say before that was just like me getting warmed up. So self and the soul, living in the domain of miracles. Gosh, this whole day is a miracle so far, right? I mean, the fact that we are here together, doing this, thinking these thoughts, and being so filled with God's energy that we are, remembering the truth of who we are. So this whole notion of navigating this rocky road between the self and the soul, right? This your inner sense of will and personality versus your etheric sense of your God consciousness, your subconscious mind, your energy, your etheric nature. That really is the dance, right? We were all there having a great time in the spiritual realm. And then it was somebody's idea, like, hey, let's incarnate! Right? And somebody had this divine idea that we should just incarnate, and whoosh, there we came, into the physical. And then ever since, it's been a trip, right? It's just been a trip. So that's really what we're here for. And now, of course, science, quantum physics, and neuroscience are trying to disprove the whole notion that there is a soul. That perhaps there isn't anything of the soul, that everything gets created by the subconscious mind. And I was like, well, but, where's God in all of this? Right? So this whole notion of where is God as we think about navigating the waters between the self and the soul, I have a little story that I thought I'd share with you about where is God. So there's this family that has these 6 children. 4 of them are just fabulous, and then there's the last 2. Elijah and Caleb, and 6 and 8 years old, and they were just, can you say hellions in church? Yeah. Just, breaking stuff and always running off, and just, so the parents were like beside themselves, the 2 moms, they were like beside themselves. That was a joke. What? They're like, really? 2 moms? Just to make it contemporary, right? I know, I just gotta make it contemporary, yeah. So they're like, I know what we'll do. We'll take him down to Pastor Joe, and maybe Pastor Joe can do something. And Pastor Joe says, all right, we'll bring him in, and but just bring Caleb first. He was the younger of the 2. So they drive him over to the pastor's place, and he goes in the office, and he sits down in the chair, and he's looking around, and Pastor Joe says, Caleb, where is God? Caleb's just sitting there like this, and he's like, Caleb, where is God? And getting more tense by the minute. And the pastor's starting to get a little annoyed. This little kid isn't even responding to him, not even really looking at him. He says, Caleb, where is God? Caleb gets up out of his chair, out the door, runs all the way back to the pastures, all the way in the farmhouse, up into his brother's room, and he closes the door and says, he's like, Caleb, what's the matter? He's like, I don't know, but God's missing, and they think we did it. is God in all of this? That's really what we've got to figure out, because science is saying, it's all the mind, and unity says it's, understanding how to use your energy. And so where is God? What our spiritual walk is about is understanding at higher and higher levels that God is who we are. That God is in fact our consciousness, and our access to God is through our conditioned awareness. But it gets messy, right? That sounds so easy and straightforward, but it gets messy, doesn't it? It gets messy trying to live this human experience and walk the walk in your human life. So there's this question of so how do we experience life? How do we experience our self-definition? Because what gives us our experience of life is how we define ourselves. Who we say we are, who I say I am. It is through our self-definition that we experience life. No place other than a Unity Church can you talk like this. You realize that, right? You go out let's talk about how you experience life. Most people be like, well, I just experience life because it's happening to me. And I'm just doing the best to navigate that. But that's actually not the case. You are experiencing your life through the lens of your consciousness, through the lens of your I am identity. So how do you form that I am identity? So what does just contemporary culture say about how you form your identity or how you experience life? What does our culture say? I experience life because of what?
External circumstances.
Yeah, external circumstances. What else?
What you do.
What else? What is our contemporary notion of how you get to know, how you form your identity? I am this way because my parents were that way. I am this way because I was raised that way. Have any of you ever heard that before? Yeah, right? It's kind of the prevailing cultural phenomenon for how we experience life. Well, I have a family that I was raised in. How many of you know, friends of mine from upstate New York where I was raised, they've got 6 kids. 2 of them stayed locally in the farming community that I was raised in and got local jobs and stayed close by. 2 of them moved off into bigger cities and got married and had professional careers. 2 of them became drug addicts, and 1 of them died young. Same family, same town, same gene pool, same values, same church, same educational system, same everything, right? But yet psychology says, oh, your parents are that way, therefore you'll be this way. What if that's not true? What about this? I'm going to give you demographic information, and then we'll see what this person turned out like. Born to a teenage, impoverished, unwed mother. Moved around her entire childhood between mother and grandmother and father. Became pregnant at 14, only then to lose the child. Raised in extreme poverty, beaten with a stick and sexually abused by various members of the family. That's Oprah Winfrey, right? So psychology says, or our cultural mindset says, you are this way because of what happened to you, and yet, Or how about, experience the death of a parent early in life, raised by an alcoholic mother and stepfather, physically and sexually abused throughout childhood. Experience drug and alcohol abuse and other addictions in adulthood. Victim of domestic violence. Multiple psychiatric diagnoses and psychiatric medications. That's me. That's me. So what's the difference between me living the life that I'm living and someone else who is defining themselves by that? See, the only difference is I don't believe that my past has anything to do with who I am. I just don't occupy that belief any longer. In fact, I have this theory. I'm going to run it all by you all, see what you think. What if the whole psychological paradigm was true for a certain part of our evolutionary journey, and we are evolving out of it? Science has been proven wrong before. In the 1800s, they believed that the Earth itself was between 20 to 40 million years old in the 1800s. And of course, in the mid-20th century, we found that the Earth is in fact 4.5 billion years old. Right? Their calculations were just off by a few billion. It's not a few billion years. It's not so bad. Right? And science also believed at one time that the universe itself was static and that it's neither contracting nor expanding. And in the 1920s, with the advent of what? Does anybody know? The 1920s, honey. 1920s, the advent of the Hubble telescope helped us to see that, in fact, the universe is what? Expanding. The universe itself is expanding. And since the 1990s, we've actually been able to see that the universe is expanding at ever accelerating paces and rates. Isn't that fascinating? So now we look back and they say, oh, isn't that funny? They used to think that the Earth was 20 million years old. Isn't that funny? They used to think that the universe was static, and now we know it is expanding. Well, I have a vision that perhaps our grandchildren's generation will look back on our generation and say, isn't that funny? They used to think that their experience of life was due to their childhood. Right? Because in fact, we are evolving as a species. We are evolving in consciousness. Spiritual teachers Barbara Marx Hubbard and Jean Houston, who, this is one of my, if I could just take a moment to share with you, when I spoke at the Unity People's Convention 2 years ago, there was, in the morning session was Barbara Marx Hubbard, and in the afternoon session was Jean Houston, and in the middle, that would be me. Of course, I was a breakout session and they were in front of hundreds, but that's okay. It was my claim to fame that day. So those spiritual teachers, and Ken Wilber, Craig Hamilton, they teach the notion of conscious evolution. Conscious evolution, and what that means, what conscious evolution means, is that we are awake and aware and fully responsible for our inner life and well-being for ourselves and humanity. Just throw in that "and humanity" part. Yeah, just in case you didn't have anything else to do. Conscious evolution, being aware of and fully responsible for your inner life and well-being for yourself and humanity. So what if the psychological paradigm was true for a time, but yet as we evolve, it is becoming no longer true? What if your experience of life is not based on your past and how you were raised and all of those things that we've all believed? What if it is based on who I say I am according to my conditioned awareness? Because I am living proof that that's the case. And so are you. You are only a product of your past according to the level at which you carry that self-definition as true. Do you get that? You are only you are only a definition of your past to the degree to which your self-definition still holds that to be true. So, what gets in the way then of you moving your self-definition from whatever that was in the past to I am awake, I am aware, I am God, I am prosperous, I am wildly happy and successful and grounded in my experience of myself in the world. Whatever you want it to be, right? What are some of the self-definitions that you want? This is where you talk back.
Abundant.
Abundant. Strong.
Healthy.
Prosperous. Healthy. Happy. Yeah. So the only thing that gets in the way of like me experiencing myself is that every moment is that somewhere I don't have the self-definition of that. So one of the things that I find gets in the way is just this little thing called fear. Fear. The yeah but mind. The what if mind. And in fact, what we call fear is in fact most often anxiety. We just don't want to call it that because that sounds like we need psychiatric medications. Right? It's actually anxiety. Fear is like this. I took my son skiing one day last winter and with a classmate of his and his dad. And my son, he's 9, and his friend on the way up on the ski lift were like, hey, let's do Black Diamond. And I was like, we're at Wachusett Mountain in Massachusetts. I'm like, all right, we're not out in the Rockies. I was like, all right, fine. And the other little boy's like, yeah, let's do Black Diamond. And they're like, they somewhere figured that that's cool, right, to do Black Diamond. I don't think either of them knew what it meant. For those of you who aren't skiers, it's the most difficult trails. So we get up to the top and we get off on the ski lift and we go over to the Black Diamond Trails, and my son and I just, we're going down. And at some point I just had this like intuitive, maybe I should check. And I turn around and the other little boy and his dad, the little boy is at the edge of the, the mountain, where it goes down like this, right? And he's just, and he just can't move. And that's what fear does. That's fear. That's it. It paralyzes you, and that's what happens, right? And so he had to do something, right? We can't like put him back on the lift. So he had to do something. So he had to put his faith in something, and in that moment, he was able to put his faith in his dad, who was like, "Come on, you can do this." And he would turn his skis and drop down. And he'd turn his skis and drop down. I mean, it was a painful half hour of getting this little guy down past this part, and where it got to be a little bit more flat. But you've always got faith in something, right? You've either got faith in your what-if mentality as being real and true, and therefore you don't act, or you have faith in God. And you're at that little edge, and you throw yourself over. Whether it's on skis, or whether it's in the metaphor of stepping into the fullness that you are, the fullness of your life. So fear is one of those things that gets in the way. The other one is this sense of kind of delusion and denial of the way our life really is. Any of you have that? Right? There's a sense of, it's just really, it's just going along fine, just the way it is. Thank you very much. Don't ask about it. Yeah, no, it's really fine. So I had the experience of that at one point in my life. I read a little bit about my earlier life. So part of my experience in life is that I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And it was back in my 20s. And I was in that delusional denial mind. Whatever people say to themselves when they are in that experience of domestic violence, I was saying to myself, oh, it's not that bad. We get along really well most of the time. I don't think it's going to get that much worse. I think we're going to be able to work this through. All of the things that people say. But of course, for those of you who know domestic violence, there is a cycle and a spiral, and it intensifies and it gets more frequent, and all of that was happening, but I was practicing delusion and denial. Well, I was at work one day, and I was in an old institutional type building, and the stair steps in those old buildings, how they're kind of marble stairs, but how the middles of them, because they're so old, are a little bit, right, and they're very slippery. Well, it was the first snow of the year, and I had snow on my boots, and I go down to the stairs to a meeting, and my foot slipped. It was at a school for the blind. It was really kind of funny. The blind people were fine. I took a header down the stairs. So I go flying down about 4 or 5 stairs, and, hit my back on the way down. So I get myself together. I'm a little embarrassed, but I go in this meeting, and I'm sitting there, and my colleagues are looking at me like, "Are you okay? You don't look so good." I was like, I fell down the stairs on the way in. I'm kind of embarrassed. And they're like, "No, you shouldn't stay. Go get yourself checked out." So I drove to one of those dock-in-the-box places, local little walk-in clinic, right? So I went in there, a dock in the box, and the doctor took me in pretty quickly and examined me, and he said, "My office is right across the hallway. Get yourself dressed and come into my office." And I thought that was a little unusual, because usually they process people through pretty quickly. So I got dressed and I go in, and he's sitting behind this big walnut desk and looking very paternal and whatnot, and he looks up at me. I sat down, he looks up at me and he says, "I don't know who's doing this to you, but I want you to know you don't have to live this way." And I freaked, because I had in fact fallen downstairs at work. And all of what was going on in my life was kind of not in my consciousness in that moment. And so I really really truly was like, what are you talking? I fell downstairs. And he shook his head and he put his head down and he looked up at me again. He said, "I've got a daughter about your age. And if someone was doing to her what I know someone is doing to you, I would want someone to say something. I'm going to write you a note to give you a few days off work, and I hope that you'll use that time to go get yourself together." And I was floored. That whole delusion and denial that I was living in was shattered, because I had no idea. But whatever it was in his trained medical eye, the bruises that were on other places in my body, things that he could see, he spoke right through my delusion and my denial. So I actually took those few days. I drove home to upstate New York, and my parents took one look at me. I normally weigh about 125 to 130 pounds. I weighed 105 pounds. My parents took one look at me and were like, "What is wrong with you? You've got to get yourself together." And it was a turning point. I never saw that man again. Never saw that man again in my life. But it was an absolute turning point in my life that I believe saved my life. Literally saved my life. So we have got to recognize that when we're deluding ourselves in any way about how God wants to express through and as us, it's a life or death situation. There's always this thing that God wants to do through and as us. And when we're saying no, we are in fact spiritually and ontologically through our being, not living or dying. Thoreau says, most men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their songs still in them. It's a powerful quote, isn't it? He wrote that at Walden Pond, which is where I did my TED Talk. So you've got to get present to how you experience your life living in the domain of miracles is breaking through that sense of delusion and denial, breaking through that sense of fear, and there's only one other option. It's moving forward in your life with faith. 5 years ago, I had that metaphysical push, to change my career. I had a full-time private practice as a therapist and a coach, was making a fine living. It was well known and well respected in my area, and I'd had for several years this nudge of, so funny, God just kept saying to me in my journaling, teach what you know, teach what you know. And I, for many years, really since I was a kid, wanted to be a teacher and a speaker. And 10 years before that, when I left a job as a clinical manager at a hospital, I went to tell the CEO of what I was going to do. I was going to go out and teach and speak. It was 12 years actually before that. And he looked at me, he's 6'4", he looked down at me and he says, people who do that are so full of themselves. What do you think you're going to do? And in fact, I failed. I failed. Developed a successful private practice after I ran out of money. I had to figure out something. But still this notion, teach what you know. Teach what you know. So finally, 5 years ago, I closed my private practice. I went into full-time teaching and speaking. You want to know if you've got faith rather than fear? Cut off your income stream. And you're going to have to make something work for yourself. And that's exactly what I did. I put my faith into action, and I closed my practice, and I started going out full-time as a speaker and teacher. And in fact, I haven't looked back. The first 2 years, I kept saying back to God, could that come with a business plan, please? That whole teach what you know thing. And there was no business plan. It was faith. Put your faith in action. And that's what I've done, and that's what I continue to do. It's what brings me here to be with you today. It's what had me do a TED Talk, publish 2 books, have a chapter in another book, speak around the country doing what I do and loving what I do. And it all really comes down to this. If you want to live in the domain of miracles, you have to understand who you are. Who you are is God consciousness. The only thing that gets in the way is fear, delusion, and denial. You break through that, move forward faithfully, and I don't recommend y'all just go cut off your income stream unless you know that's yours to do, and then you'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine, because let me tell you this, 3 things that I've hung myself on. Romans 8:28, all things are always unfolding for your highest good for those who love and serve the Lord. Romans 8:28. Mark 9:23 says all things are possible for those who believe. Now do you believe that or not? Faith or fear? All things are possible. In the workshop, when I finish up today and have some time to sit with you, what I'm going to talk about is actually how you live that way, how you live the truth that all things are possible and create your consciousness in that, spiritual practices and ways of being that create that. All things are possible for those who believe. And Job chapter 22, verse 28, I love this. And I'll think of it in just a minute. As you decree a thing, it will be done for you, and the light will shine upon your ways. As you decree a thing, it will be established for you, and the light will shine upon your ways. What is the light? It is God consciousness through and as you, ongoingly expressing the truth of who you are, your God self on earth. Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you.